Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you guys all about BookCon. So I'm very excited to do this video. The first part is going to be kind of a voiceover style vlog detailing the things that I did while I was in New York, and then the latter half is going to be my actual review and my question answering portion. So without further ado, let's get into the video.
Alright, so day one starts bright and early. I got up the ass crack of dawn and I got myself a chocolate chip bagel at the airport because who doesn't love chocolate chips? As you can see, New Jersey's beautiful. We flew into Newark and then we got to New York at about 11 a.m. I didn't end up going to the first day of Book Expo. We ended up just walking around New York, and here's us in Washington Square Park taking a break because our feet hurt because we were too stupid to use the subway the first day that we were there. We saw some really kick-ass music and was a really big fan of this guy whose Venmo account is Sax Worker. And then we walked around Greenwich a little bit and got us some motherfucking Italian food. It was delicious. 10 out of 10 experience. Would recommend Ruby Rosa. And that concludes my day one experience. For day two, I actually attended Book Expo, and as you can tell, it was crowded as fuck. But I was lucky enough to meet up with some lovely booktubers, and I kind of got to chill and take pictures in the morning. That was kind of my main goal. I did end up getting ARCs, but we mostly just sat around and did nothing. At about noon, I ended up going to lunch with some people, and that was definitely a highlight, just getting to like sit and chill. The only picture I have is of Robbie drinking this shitty Pepsi. And then there's the stack of ARCs that I obtained this day. After Book Expo, I didn't end up staying that long. I ended up hanging with the Power Squad for the rest of the day. Rhiannon had a show that day, and I don't know, I just hung out with people. It was a good time. And then for day three of Book Expo, this was definitely my busiest day. I woke up bright and early to get in line for the Taryn Fisher signing, and then I sat in line for an hour and a half to get a copy of The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, but it was a lot of fun. And then I ended up taking pictures with Robbie and some other lovely booktubers. Shout out to Jenna for these pictures. Took even more pictures inside, and then there was a lot of sitting for like 2 to 3 hours as I was waiting for other people to finish up with their ARCs. But as you can see, all was not lost. I got Chick-fil-A after waiting for 2 to 3 hours, and it was worth it and delicious. After that, the squad, aka Robbie, CC, and Jordan, we decided to go to Brooklyn and take pictures in front of Bookstore Magic, and that was a whole hell of a lot of fun. I hadn't been to Brooklyn, but it was probably my favorite experience in New York, my favorite place in New York at least. And here's the thick cat as we were walking to the Big Honcho media party, and that's what this was. And it was fun. It was cool, and there was good food, and it was fun meeting other people. And then we topped off the night by going to the booktuber pub night. So now we come to BookCon. I met some amazing people. I went to this awesome Penguin event. That was a whole lot of fun with some other booktubers. But mostly I explored New York with Hayden. I didn't end up staying that long at BookCon because it was our last day in New York. I didn't go to day 2 of BookCon. So here is us exploring Central Park. This was probably one of my favorite things that we did. It was just really beautiful and like calm, and I don't know, I just liked that we got to do things that wasn't in a convention center because, you know, Javits is only so pretty. We also got some really good food, and then we saw the Empire State Building light up at night at the top of the rock, which was, I don't know, one of the highlights, and that was it.
Okay, are you guys ready to talk about the truth about BookCon? I think this is the part that people have been waiting for. I tweeted a while ago that I was going to give my honest and critical thoughts on BookCon and BEA in New York, and whether the experience is worth it or not. I gotta say, I kind of struggled for a while figuring out how I was going to format this video and the things that I was going to say, because genuinely from the bottom of my heart I had a fantastic time. I was really expecting things to go wrong, or I was expecting to feel left out, but genuinely I had a really good time. That's not to say that like everything went perfect and that there's nothing wrong with the event as a whole, which we'll get into in a second, but had a good time, and I think there are reasons behind that, so we're gonna get into that. The main reason I think I had such a good time is because I had a game plan and I stuck to it and I was realistic. I think in any situation it can be kind of hard to know what to expect, and I think some people go in with unrealistic expectations on the amount of ARCs that they're going to get, the amount of people they're going to meet, or just how much time they're gonna have to explore the city. For me, those were my main 3 objectives, right? I think the main 3 objectives that anyone can break down this experience into: how are you going to prioritize exploring New York, getting those ARCs, and meeting new people. For me personally, I wanted to meet most of the people that I had met online, that I had already established friendships with, so my prioritization was meeting people, exploring New York, and then getting ARCs. I think you can do all of these, but I don't think you can do them all at once. I don't think you can do them easily all in one day and not get tired and burn out and exhausted. So I knew going into it what my goals and priorities were, and they changed a little bit depending on what the day looked like. for each day of Book Expo and BookCon, but I think it's important to really sit down and think like, why am I going to this event? What do I hope to get out of it? And for me, I also kept my expectations low. I know that sounds bad, but I didn't want to go in and think this is going to be the most fantastic event. I'm going to do everything and then be disappointed and let down. I also didn't have much to expect, I guess, going in because I'd never been. It exceeded my very low and or non-existent expectations. So I'll kind of like break down how I prioritize different things different days, which I think you could probably see in my vlog, but like the first day of BEA, I didn't actually go because there weren't any arcs that I personally wanted, and I knew a lot of people weren't even going to show up on that Wednesday, so I ended up just exploring New York with my boyfriend because I brought Hayden with me, which is kind of another added factor. He couldn't go to BEA with me, so I didn't want to spend like an inordinate amount of time at BEA, so that's what I did the first day. The second day, I didn't have any specific art goals, but I knew that I wanted to go to the event, so I went to BEA mostly just to hang out with people, and that's what I did, and had a really good time. And then afterwards we explored New York. And then on day 3 I did have specific art goals. There were 2 to 3 arcs that I had to have. So the first half of the day, which is when most of those arc drops were, I set aside time to stand in lines by myself or with a couple of other people and get those arcs. And then the latter half of the day, like I said, I did a lot on that Friday. I ended up hanging out with a ton of people, and then I ended up going to Brooklyn with a few other friends. And so again, I had a really great time and I fulfilled all the things that I wanted because I prioritized my time. And then the last day of BookCon, I'm not gonna lie to you, that was the day that I was like the most exhausted and wanted to talk to people the least, which is kind of shitty because that's the day where like people were coming who I had not previously met. So like the first half of that day I definitely set aside to meet people who hadn't been at Book Expo. I think I did that for like 3 to 4 hours, and then after that I did leave BookCon early and I did end up exploring New York. It was my final day. I didn't actually go to the last day of BookCon. Anyway, that's kind of what things looked like. And before we really get into it, I need to disclaim I have very mild generalized anxiety and intrusive thoughts, but I do not have social anxiety. I know a lot of people do have social anxiety, but I cannot speak to that, and I cannot speak to how that's going to affect your experience. Hopefully in answering some of these questions, you'll kind of understand whether or not this is an event that's going to be good for your mental health, whether it's something that you're actually going to want to try to brave, because I know that this can be a very tough experience for a lot of people. I just need you guys to know that ahead of time. But let's get into some questions that you guys had for me on what the experience was like and whether or not it's worth it. I'm going to be breaking these down into like a logistics kind of category, like what the actual experience is like, and then into like the social aspects. For the logistics aspect, the first question was hotels/food, like where did I stay, I guess, and what kind of food did I eat, and how expensive is it? Is the convention worth the money? So just kind of like a general question. Hotels and food can definitely be expensive. Hotels were definitely the most expensive part of my experience. On average, I think people end up spending $500 to $2,000 to $3,000 on this experience. I'm not gonna lie to you, like obviously it's gonna depend on how long you want to stay in the city, but it's not cheap. And I think if you are a struggling college student, if you are still in high school, and if you personally do not get accepted to Book Expo, which I'll get into later, I don't think that it's necessarily worth it, because I think the main reason that people want to go is A, to get arcs, and there are not that many arcs handed out at BookCon specifically, and the second reason is to like meet people, make friends, and for that I think that the internet's actually a better place to kind of form those friendships and build those friendships. Nothing is going to be the same as like meeting someone face to face for sure, but I think actually forming friendships is way better done online anyway. I think if I were still in college, I don't think that it would be worth it to me personally to go, but I can't really like tell you whether or not it's worth it. I think you kind of have to know yourself. Back to the food question, I didn't spend that much money on food because I spent most of my time at the Javits Center, and I didn't eat while I was at the Javits Center because I didn't want to spend money on like expensive Starbucks and cafeteria food. So I actually spent a little bit less money while I was in the city than I thought that I was going to, but a lot of money went to my plane ticket and to the hotel room itself. So the next question is, I want to know more about arcs and author signing events. How does that work? I feel like everyone ends up coming away with like 100 arcs. That's a very good question. I think if you want to have a successful trip in terms of obtaining arcs and that's your number one goal, you have to have a plan and you have to really stick to that goal. I know that I'm not the type of person that likes to have a hour by hour itinerary when I'm on a trip of any sort. So for me, I didn't really prioritize arcs for that reason. It's not because I didn't want arcs. I just like knew that wasn't for me. You have to stay really focused and you have to plan out things ahead of time. Some people are selling spreadsheets of BookCon and Book Expo arc drops, event signings, that sort of thing. So if you want that, I think that's probably the easiest way to do things. Otherwise, you're gonna have to scour the websites for BookCon and Book Expo, and you're also going to have to go to publisher Twitter accounts, follow them, and then also walk the show floor and take pictures of the little cards at each publisher booth to see when they're dropping arcs at different days. It's a lot. It's very overwhelming, I'm not gonna lie to you. And in terms of the differences between events, I think Emma from Emma Books does a really good job at describing the different kinds of things that are there, but the main categories are arc drops, which is just you go and pick up a book. There's ticketed arc signings, which you basically get a ticket ahead of time and then you go and get an arc signed. There's non-ticketed signing lines, you basically can just line up. That's usually at Book Expo. Expo. I don't know how many of those are at BookCon. And then there's panels, obviously, where you go and listen to people speak on different topics. So like I said, Emma breaks it down a little bit better. I'll put her link in the description for the video that she discusses. The only thing that I think has changed since then is that the signings at BookCon specifically, you don't go in person to get the tickets anymore. You have to get them ahead of time online. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same next year or not. Like I said though, to make things easier, I would buy spreadsheets. I would just really plan things if your main goal is to get ARCs. It's a wild ride, just truly. One question I have about BookCon is what kind of people show up? Is it completely saturated with booktubers and Goodreads reviewers, or do a lot less social media heavy people show up too? I like this question a lot because I think a lot of people assume that it's very booktuber heavy because you see all these pictures, but the reality is that, especially for Book Expo, the majority of the people there are non-internet people. Book Expo is primarily industry professionals such as like librarians, other publishers, agents, that sort of thing. I think the audience tends to skew a little bit older, and I think the event as a whole, because of that, tends to feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more like organized chaos, as opposed to BookCon, which is open to the public, so anyone can buy a ticket, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know. And so for those events, it is primarily just book lovers who want to come to a convention. I would say that there's probably no more than 200 to 300 like online personalities in general, and I'd say BookTube probably maybe 150. I could be wrong, but I think that's probably fairly accurate. Differences between Book Expo and BookCon, like I kind of previously mentioned, I think Book Expo tends to feel a little bit more calm, and also you have to be accepted to Book Expo, so in general there's just less people than there are at BookCon. And then also I think they give out more ARCs at Book Expo as a whole. That's why I personally wanted to attend. Makes sense because the people that are giving out the ARCs definitely want to give them to people who are going to review them and like pass them along to other people to review. So that's kind of the biggest differences. So overall, just more ARCs at Book Expo. Is it worth going to Book Expo? It's more expensive, so I'm not sure if I want to go. This question is kind of hard to answer because I think it's entirely dependent on whether or not you're accepted to Book Expo. I don't think a lot of people know this. You have to be accepted, period, to Book Expo. You can't just like buy a ticket. Most people apply in the community for a media pass, which if you get approved covers both the expense of Book Expo and BookCon. So when I got my pass, it was completely free to me and I didn't have to pay for anything. I think there are other passes you can apply for that do cost money, like a blogger pass, or like there is a pass that I think you have to pay like $300 for, but you also still have to be approved for it. So like I said, I think it's entirely dependent on whether or not you get accepted. I definitely had a better time at Book Expo, so I personally think it was very much worth it, but I think that's also very dependent on whether or not your friends get accepted to go to Book Expo. It's a much more exclusive event, so it can be a little isolating if you get accepted to Book Expo and your friends don't. And for the people that I know that were kind of iffy on their experience at BookCon and Book Expo were the people who like got accepted to Book Expo and didn't really have very many like close friends that they felt they could rely on during Book Expo. So I think that's something to definitely be aware of. Worth it is sort of like there's a lot of factors involved. That kind of moves us into the friend/social aspect of BookCon Book Expo, which I think is the thing that people talk the most about online, and I don't think anyone ever gives like very clear answers on what the experience is like socially. So like I previously mentioned, I had a really good time because I knew people at both events, both BookCon and Book Expo, and I knew people in different friend groups. I think that's really important. I also talked to people and made friends prior to the events. It wasn't like I had just commented like once on someone's tweet or like commented on their Instagram post and expected us to like build an instant rapport at BookCon or Book Expo, which I think some people like think you can do. I mean, you can do that. It depends on like the person you're going up to, but I think it's much more comfortable if you've established friendships ahead of time. You know what you're expecting. You know, I think that people in general should be kind and accepting, and my experience was even if I wasn't going to hang out with people, or even if I didn't feel comfortable hanging out with a group of people because I wasn't like super tight with them, everybody was friendly. Don't want anyone to think that you're gonna go in and people are gonna be rude to you, but I think there's a difference between like people just being friendly to you and then them being your friends. So I think, like I said, you want to make sure you establish those friend groups ahead of time. That way you have the most fulfilling experience at both events. I don't think I would have been comfortable going to either BookCon or Book Expo if I didn't have an established friend group. I know some people say like, oh, I'm just going for the ARCs, and that's true, but there is going to be a lot of downtime. I think you guys saw in my vlog a pretty good example of that. I think there was a lot more downtime than I even recorded, but you're gonna not want to be on the show floor at all times, and if you don't have people to make that experience better, it can be a little bit isolating. So I think that's something that's really important to know. So those are kind of my overall thoughts, but let's get into some of the questions, and I think that'll kind of explain even further my experience and like my tips to you guys. The first question is there an elite booktube group? group like only 5K and up for this pick, fellas, or is everyone just chilling with everyone? I can guarantee that none of the creators at this event or creators with larger sub counts consider themselves to be elite. At least that's not the vibe that I got at all. The reality is that the bigger creators have been around longer and have established friendships with other people who have also been around longer. I think a lot of people just assume that numbers attract numbers, but that's really not the case if you look at the friend groups that are established. Growth isn't linear on YouTube, but the longer you've been around, the more likely it is that you're gonna have more subscribers, right? So the people that have big subscribers have been around longer, and the people that started this community, there were only like 5 of them, so clearly they're going to band together and form a friendship, and those friendships have been around for a while, right? So it kind of makes sense that they all hang out together. It's not really an elitist thing, it's just the reality of the way this community started, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Is everyone chilling with everyone? No. Point blank, people have established friendships, and part of the reason that people go to these events is to hang out with their friends. It's not just to like meet subscribers or to make new friends. They want to hang out with people that they haven't seen in a long time. Most of the people in the book community do not live close to each other. They want to hang out with people that they don't see every day. And that's kind of what I went into it wanting to do. I wasn't like, oh, let me hang out with people I've never talked to before. It was, I want to hang out with the people that I have like loved and live states away. No, not everybody chills with everybody. That being said, that's not to say that you can't make friends with some bigger creators. Like I personally hung out with some bigger creators while I was in New York, and I never felt unwelcome. I think, and again, a big part of that is like being invited ahead of time and having friends within a larger circle. But I basically just made sure that I had friends wherever I was going because I didn't want to feel left out. And I also try to be very conscientious of not overstepping boundaries or inviting myself to events that I wasn't invited to. And I think that's something that some people feel more comfortable or less comfortable doing. And I think in hindsight, some people might have like invited themselves to things that they weren't necessarily invited to and might feel weird post event. I just really never wanted to feel like I was attaching myself to people that didn't want me around or to feel like the people that were hanging out with me were obligated to hang out with me. Like, oh, well, we know she doesn't have any friends, so like we have to hang out with her. So like I said, I made sure that my circle was wide, that I knew people in different friend groups so I could kind of like bounce around and just have the best overall experience. And then kind of speaking more to like other people's experience, from what I could see, I noticed that people tended to cluster together in groups of like 5+ people, and I think there were like 4 to 5 of those groups at Book Expo and BookCon, and everybody seemed to be having a good time. It didn't feel like there was like an in group and an out group. It was very much everybody is here, everybody's having a good time. That being said, I'm not gonna try to like sugarcoat things and say that everybody had a fantastic time and that nobody ever felt left out, because people did feel left out. I do know that. A couple of the people that I've talked to didn't have a good time, and that sucks. I think to mitigate some of those things though, like I said, comes down to established friend groups. Who do you intend to hang out with while you're there? And not to make assumptions. I think that is one of the biggest detriments. I think some of the unhappiness that people feel can stem from jealousy or longing to be a part of various groups. But I think if you have an established friend group already set up and you are excited to go and hang out with those people, you're not going to be looking at other friend groups thinking like, damn, like I wish I was a part of that elite group of people. It's not like that if you've got like true good friends. From my experience, if you feel like you have a place, then you're going to be happy. Also, a little aside too, I think this can also help because I think some people do have friends, but they don't talk prior to the event on like what the expectations are when they get there. If you're gonna want someone that's consistent to stand in signing lines with you, hit them up and be like, hey, do you have anyone to stand in signing lines with you? Like, can we go together and stay together the whole time? There's nothing wrong with asking that, but you should probably establish that ahead of time so that you don't feel weird or the other person doesn't feel obligated if that's not really how they want to handle the event. Communication is key. Is it kind of weird to see people in real life? And were there times when people were or felt left out? Okay, so for me, it wasn't really weird to see anyone in real life. For people I was really close with that I had like FaceTimed prior, not really. Like it was just awesome to actually get to hug them. That was like the biggest thing for me. Like, you're real, like I could touch you. And then for bigger creators, I think my experience is probably very different from other people's. I'm older and I didn't start watching BookTube until about 2 years ago. So I don't really feel a part of the fandom culture of BookTube. I just feel like another creator, if that makes sense. I never felt like, oh my God, I'm like scared to meet this person. I've been watching them since I was in middle school. Like I never had that experience. I felt more like we were peers. Obviously people have more subscribers than me, that's sure, but like I never felt fandom aspect. And I think that's kind of another thing that can freak people out, can make people uncomfortable, is like knowing the difference between friends and subscribers. What is the difference there? Can I be friends with someone that I'm a fan of? Thankfully that wasn't something that I personally had to deal with, and it wasn't a weird experience for me because I joined the community and was part of the community before I really like became fans of people, if that makes sense, you know? So I'm not sure how I would handle the situation if I were like a big fan of someone but I also wanted to be their friend, or I don't know. I think that's a very hard situation to navigate, but I think in general, if I were a big fan of someone and I knew it was going to kind of weird me out, I think I would introduce myself and then go hang out with my friends. I think that's what I would do. And then my last question from people is, how cliquey are booktubers? I would say as cliquey as any part of the internet or any part of real life. People have their established friend groups that they're going to hang out with, and that's completely normal and completely fine. Some people are more focused on expanding their friend group. Some people just want to keep things tight-knit, and I think that's okay, especially at these events that are extremely overwhelming and extremely tiring. I think as long as people are polite to you, that's really all that you can ask. At the end of the day, like, you want friendships to feel mutual. You don't want to feel like you're having to like bust through to get into a friend group. Cliquey, sure, maybe. And that was my experience too. Some people were more willing to like expand their friend group and they wanted to be friends, and then some people just wanted to chill and hang out. I never felt offended because like this shit's scary. There's so many people, especially for bigger creators. Like, I can't imagine having to like say hi to so many people and having to like give so much of yourself every single day when all you want to do is like get arcs and like hang out with your friends, but you also have to juggle the fact that you have subscribers you have to talk to. So it's cliquey. I think it's cliquey for a reason, but it's not like overwhelmingly so. It's not cliquey in an elitist sense. So I know that was very tangenty and very ranty. I hope this kind of gives you an idea of what the experience is like, maybe helps you figure out whether or not this is an event that you would like to attend. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. But I had a really good time. I had a really good time filming this, and I love you guys, and until next time.